in?
Yeah, good morning. Welcome to Veterans Voices with Joe and SteveO, and thanks for joining us this morning. So SteveO tells me, and I was reading your bio that you had some involvement in 9/11. So I don't know, as we're coming up on that, very important date in U.S. history. I'd love to hear that story, and I'm sure our listeners would too.
Yeah, so before we do that, let's introduce our guests. It's Lieutenant General Robert Van Antwerp. I met General Van just after 9/11 in 2002. He was in Hawaii, and I had the opportunity to spend a few minutes, and you were sharing that experience that you had, and which really, as we were approaching this anniversary, it seems so long ago, but I'm guessing that for you, it seems like it was just yesterday. So would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself first, sir, and then maybe you can get into your story.
Okay, well, it's great to be with you, Steve and Joe, and nice to be on here. And yes, it's an unforgettable time. I'll get to a little bit of 9/11 here in a few minutes, but I did 39 years of service, made 22 moves. Those 39 years of service, I wouldn't change a thing. I didn't always get what I was wanting to get, but I got what God wanted me to get. Let's put it that way. And so it was a wonderful career. I have a wonderful wife that has made every move with me, all 22. Actually, we started dating when we were 15, and dated 7 years because you can't be married and be at West Point, and I'm a West Point graduate, 1972. So we got married after graduation there. We have 5 children, really an Army family. I've got one of my sons is an assistant division commander in Hawaii in the 25th Division. Another one is here at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, near us, and he'll take the 10th group for the Special Forces next summer. I have a son-in-law who's a major in cyber command at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. So that's how we are. And then I have another daughter and a son. That other son was in the Army for a period of time and is out now. So that's my fam, and we just love it. I have 19 grandkids too. I guess I should say that. One more in the hopper, but yeah.
Well, sir, you might be interested to know a little bit about Joe. So Joe is also an engineer. Joe, you want to tell him a little bit about your background?
So I started my career as a Navy diver, and then did mostly all engineering work throughout my career. I did 22 years, retired as a commander out here in Hawaii. It's very, very nice. Yeah. So it's been good. My wife's been with me for most of it. We started dating when I was a young lieutenant, and she, then we got married, and she's been with me since. So it's been great. I mean, military's been great for me, and I've really enjoyed it. So while we're talking about your background, what have you been doing since you retired?
Yeah, well, I retired in 2011. We bought a little house on the lake here in North Carolina in 2010 and started coming down here on the weekends. So I went from about 8,200 square feet to 2,200 square feet, which is the way to do it. Get rid of all that stuff. And so we live a real simple life here. But I am on a number of corporate boards. I'm on USAA's board, a company called Caliber, which is an outstanding company, does a lot of support for the military. Another one, Cardno GS, which has to do with environmental stuff. A lot of engineering and all of that for me. And then I do executive development for leader development for a company called the Flippin Group out of College Station, Texas. And I have a number of clients and get to talk to them about leadership and talk about the things they're dealing with. As you probably both know, it can get lonely at the top, and it's good to maybe have a third party that can talk to you about things that are on your plate. And so that's a real joy for me. I do it out of the love of the game. I love trying to help people with leadership if I can.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say that that's kind of some of the things that Joe and I have been talking about, like that we wanted to do with Veterans Voices with Joe and SteveO, was we really, because we're both disabled vets, we wanted to be able to outreach to other veterans who may be experiencing things that we experience or that you may have. So by having a forum where we can share these experiences, it might encourage other people to motivate them to either take the right path as they're getting out of the military to the transition, and then when they're outside, how do they navigate the VA and those types of things. So this fits right in line with probably a lot of the things that you're doing as well.
Yeah, I love what you guys are doing. This was an easy yes for me to say, yeah, I'll come on and talk to you guys. As I say, you're my people, and just loved my time in the military, love being with people that have served. I guess that's the biggest thing. I love to tell people, I just served for 39 years and had all different aspects of that, some in leadership positions. Just to kind of transition a little bit into 9/11, I was on the Army staff at the Pentagon. My office was on the E-ring of the Pentagon. If you've ever been in that big building, it's one of the bigger office buildings in probably the world. It's probably not the biggest anymore. Everybody tries to get one a little bit bigger, but if you're parking way out in North Parking, you can have a good mile from your parking spot to the building. A lot of people walk around the building for exercise. It's that big. But I was in there on the Army staff. I was what they call the Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management. Essentially, I was the overseer on the Army staff for all the installations in the Army. And so maybe like the ultimate mayorship with all the things that go with that. And had a great group of garrison commanders out in the field at all those installations. But that's where I was on the date 9/11. And my office was, if you follow the plane that came into the Pentagon, it flew over the Marine Corps barracks. If you've ever been to DC, now there's that wonderful structure that looks like something that could actually catch an airplane, I guess, but it's got a lot of history behind it. But it flew over the Marine Corps barracks and over the helipad, which was right outside the window of my office. And so the fuselage of that aircraft went right in through my office, and my really good friend, Tim Maud, who was a 3-star general, he was the Assistant Chief of Staff for personnel for the whole Army. And he was unfortunately, in his office with a group of his people that morning at 9:37. I'll never forget the date, the time, or really any of the details, because it's fresh to me. And so when that plane flew in there, it totally took out pretty much his entire staff. And so we have a memorial to him, a memorial golf tournament, and never forget about Tim Maud and his people, most of which I knew by name and knew well. In my office, the left wing just beside the fuselage went through my office. It was by the grace of God, I was, I'll plug that in there. There we go. But I was, I had a meeting in Crystal City that morning that started at 8:30. And I had a lot of my people coming from all over the world, really, to meet together. So I had most of my staff over there, or I might have been in the same, had a similar meeting that Tim Maud had. And, but my secretary was in there, Barbara, and we lost her that day. And one of my really executives, Sandy, was in there, and we lost her that day. And then Brian Birdwell, who was one of the 2 execs, was on my staff. He went down into the bathroom on the C wing. If you can picture, or you've ever been to the Pentagon, the E ring is the outer ring, the A ring is the inner ring, and inside the A ring, there's a courtyard. And that courtyard became incredibly important to the story of the recovery and taking care of. That's where the triage was done for everybody that was injured in the Pentagon. We took them there, and then it was decided, the medical people, where to go from there. I'll just tell you about Brian Birdwell just for a second, because he's an incredibly close friend of mine. He was a lieutenant colonel at the time on our staff, and you know what execs do. They take care of you. and he did an incredible job for me and for my deputy. He was really my deputy's exec, and he was in the bathroom when the plane hit. A fireball went down the hallway that goes all the way from the E ring to the A ring, and just lighting everything on fire because it was a fuel fire, just incredibly hot. Just a side note, I went back in my office 2 weeks later, and even safes that were supposed to be, you know, good up to X number of degrees were melted. There was nothing left, nothing left. And as that fireball went down, Brian was just coming out of the bathroom on the C wing, which he tells with a lot of amusement, you know, that going to the bathroom might save your life. But he did catch on fire the minute he stepped out of there. And of course, we used to wear a lot of polyester back in those days. And I'm very cautious about that, of what you had. So he caught on fire. He was burned over about 60% of his body that day. So he was one of them that actually, he was face down in the hallway. They had just renovated our part of the building, and they had put sprinkler systems in there and Kevlar on the windows. So I hate to look at it this way, but it could have been worse. Had some of those things. But Brian immediately hit the floor. He said there was a black acrid smoke and cloud down within about 6 inches of the floor when he was just in the edge of the hallway there. So he even had to turn his head sideways to breathe, but the sprinklers put him out. And then he didn't know which way to go. Could he even crawl? And someone that I don't know, Brian now knows him, I don't know who it was, yelled from another part of the building, came out through one of the crossways and said, "Is there anybody in this hallway?" And Brian, they were able to connect. He helped Brian get out of there. Brian was burned terribly, and got him to the courtyard where they did triage really quick. They said he has to get to the burn unit like now. So a number of people got him outside of the Pentagon onto the sidewalk, and another angel, I'll call them, threw the seats out of his Escalade, drove about halfway to the burn unit at George Washington University on the sidewalk, and saved Brian's life. Wow. But that started really Brian and I were already friends, but that started a deep friendship for life, because pretty much every Saturday morning when I was in town, I went and did physical therapy with him. And that was for many, many, many months. And even have, if you'll permit me, I'll tell one story about President Bush when he and Laura came to visit Brian. Brian was, looked like a mummy because they were wrapping him every time he would get treated, and they debreathed the fire, you know, what the fire had done and everything. Thank God he didn't breathe in any of the smoke. There were people that passed that had no burn externally, but they had burned their lungs. And so Brian, you know, looked like a mummy, I guess would be the best way to describe, with just his eyes showing. And President Bush came to visit. And this is no political statement about either side. Just want to tell you what this commander-in-chief did. Of course, the president always has kind of an entourage or whatever. He had everybody stay out of the burn unit, and he and Laura went bed to bed for what I would say was probably a couple of hours. And as he got into Brian's room, I happened to be there because it was a Saturday morning. It was, and Brian was undergoing physical therapy that day. But the president came to the end of his bed, and both of you know that generally a subordinate salutes a superior. Well, this day it was reversed. The president saluted Brian from the end of his bed, and Brian, as best he could, got a salute up with all his bandages and everything. And then the president, after they exchanged salutes, the president went over and told Brian how proud he was, and said a prayer right there for Brian in his bed. And I've taken a leadership lesson from that, is what you do when no one's looking really shows your character and your leadership. And this was one of those cases. So that's a bit of that story. Tell you the other part of that story is I was a commander, and at that time I had about 500 people working for me in the Pentagon. They weren't on the same side of the Pentagon that the plane came in, and then had offices throughout the country. But we had about 500 people working in the Pentagon. And so like a leader, any leader would do, you want to know who was affected by this. Did we lose anybody? We very quickly made the rule, if you will, that you couldn't just say, I know Steve or Joe, they're over in Europe visiting one of the Europe installations. We said you had to hear their voice and recognize their voice or see them. That was our watchword. We're going to take none of what I think they're somewhere. It took 3 or 4 hours. By the time we located everybody, we knew we were missing 3, the 2 girls and Brian. And then we quickly were able to track down Brian. And then, much to our we're just so saddened that our girls perished in it. But what is normally a vibrant office with a bunch of people in, we just weren't in there that morning. And so that was, I guess I'll stop right there. And if you have any other questions, there's more details, but.
Well, I have a question about, so when
Sure.
you ended up back at the Pentagon, you came back to the Pentagon that day, you didn't necessarily have a place to go. What did you do then? Like what space did you go to, and what did you do to start taking like actions to find your people and get accountability and all of that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. We did come back to the Pentagon in a couple of hours. Of course, everything was roped off and all that, but I was able to get in, went in the other side of the building where our other offices were, talked to our people. I think, I guess another lesson in leadership is that when everyone else is losing their head, you have to keep yours. So there were people affected. I remember going to the A ring where they were doing the triage, and part of it, I was really looking for Barbara and Sandy to just see it. Anyone seen them or anything? But it became pretty clear that they perished in there, and they were holding down the office, so to speak. There's always someone that's there answering the phones and taking care of people. So, but we had a conversation with our people, and then we quickly started to look elsewhere. Who else could we help? And so I was part of the litter bearers that carried people out to the sidewalk to get them to the hospital. That was part of mine. At some point when you figure I've done pretty much all I can do, let me just get in there and pitch. And so that was what we did. And a lot of our people, they were assisting people in it. Of course, at the same time, the firefighters were pumping gallons, and really a lot of the damage to the Pentagon, some was the fire, but the other was the water that came in, because just thousands and thousands of gallons pumped in there to put it out. A fuel fire's like none other. It's they burn hot. They are hard to extinguish, and so I guess the first thing, as I said, was accountability. The next thing was to pitch in and try and help, and anyone that was injured to the point they needed to get to the hospital, we were helping on doing that. One of the real dilemmas that day, by the way, it was just kind of a sidelight, is you think, well, everyone wants to call their home, call their family, tell them I'm okay, if you're okay. And the cell towers were just overwhelmed, so you couldn't get through. My wife actually heard, I was able to talk to a friend, one of my friends that was at the meeting with me, lived in Atlanta, had a cell phone that had an Atlanta number, and it went through Atlanta. And then his wife called my wife and told her I was all right. But, really, it was not a time I wasn't worried about myself, but I knew that there were others she would be. So anyway, that's what I did the rest of that day, pretty much.
So you mentioned, when we spoke for a minute, when we were setting all this up, that you remain connected to a group of people. You guys kind of, I guess you probably speak every 9/11 and
We
maybe
do.
reminisce and catch up and see how everybody's doing, if everybody needs anything. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I keep track of the two families of Barbara and Sandy, but also Brian Birdwell, who I didn't mention, but he's recovered. He has to watch being out in the sun, but he is a state senator for the great state of Texas. And so we talk more frequently than just 9/11. Anytime something comes up, we talk about it. And he's the one guy in the world I talk politics with because he's a state senator, but I don't talk much politics. But yes, we do. One other sidelight is, what happens in the aftermath of something like this? The Army and all the services set up a place where family members could come, they could get help, they could get assistance, they could talk to their loved ones and all of that. And there was a lot of tending to after that. And some great people were put in charge of that. And so a lot of my people volunteered there and assisted. We took meals to families for literally months after that. But yes, absolutely, when 9/11 comes, I mean, it's a race to who will call whom first. But those have been, I think it's like anything else. I feel a little bit of West Point on a much smaller scale, but, my class, when you go through what you go through there, or you could say Ranger School or Dive School, Joe, or whatever, there's something about going through hardship together that just bonds you together. And so that part of 9/11 I look forward to is reconnecting every year. And we'll do it. It's coming up. I got a standing calendar invite to myself. Make those calls.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true what you said, how the times that are the most challenging in our life, whether it's a challenging training that you're through or some life experience that you've gone through, those are the things that bind people together, and really, I feel, bring like the most value to your life. I wanted to ask a VA question, since we have a lot of veterans that listen
Okay.
to this.
Good.
So as tragedies happen and then they are no longer fresh, and then the next tragedy occurs, so over the years, for Brian and for you and for the other people on your staff or people that in the Pentagon that were exposed, so I'm sure there were exposures, there were toxins, there was all kinds of crazy stuff that occurred that day at 9/11, and sometimes those things aren't seen for a long time. What kind of things has the VA done and the government have done to make sure they're taking care of everybody?
Yeah, I would say, and I was involved a little bit on the periphery, but because Brian was in the system, and later on he would do a lot with the VA. But just like you say, there's those seen and unseen. One of the things that we're seeing today is PTSD. Well, if you want an event in your life that's going to affect you like that, 9/11 would do it to you. And so that's one of the kind of unseen, but those with visible things like Brian had, the VA has been awesome in what they tried to do. I know the VA gets, good and bad raps, but to me, they responded well. And of course, there's a big VA system in the DC, Northern Virginia area that was very helpful. Since then, I've been involved. I'll just tell you one other thing I've been involved in. It's what they call Operation Heal Our Patriots. It is run by Samaritan's Purse. It's they take 10 couples a week for 16 weeks every summer. This is about the 9th year they've done it. We've gone 8 different years with them. And one of the things they do, they talk to people about the VA, and they have experts that know the system there that can talk to these wounded warriors and wounded warrior couples to try and help them through the system. But the medical, some of these, what I've seen, some of these folks, they're going 4, 5, 6 appointments a week a week.
Right.
The other part of that that came out of that was that a lot of the spouses became caregivers. And, when you have children and you're trying to care for your wounded spouse, that is tough. And it kind of changes the dynamic in a marriage relationship. So we try and do a lot of healing with that too. And that's why we're involved in that part of it. But overall, I mean, the VA is tough. I've known a number of the leaders of the VA, and it's tough work. General Shinseki, of course, was one of my chiefs of staff when I was on the Army staff.
So as we kind of wrap this, we've got a few minutes. So I guess the one important question I have for you too would be, how did that impact, I know you're a Christian, how did that event impact your faith and how you went forward? Because you still had another 10 years of your career to go.
Right. Well, that's a great question, Steve. I think one of the things you deal with, why was I in Crystal City that morning? I mean, it was planned way ahead of time, but went over there about 8:30, 9:37. This hits, my office is destroyed. You have to be a little introspective and say, why me? Why am I still here in that? I'll tell you where God brought me through that is that I'm not finished with you yet. And I like to think that's why I'm determined. I'm 70 years old right now. I will always work and try and help and be of service, whether I'm on the elder board at my church, very involved there, Samaritan's Purse that we talked about there. I think what it did, it even increased my fervency to be in there and help people that are in need. So that's kind of what happened. I became a Christian in 1977, and I have a very strong faith, and that's the centerpiece for our family. And you can imagine, I've got my two older boys. I told you what they're doing now, or one of them will do soon, but they were both in Delta Force, and they both had numerous deployments. And you just pray a lot. You have faith that this is part of God's plan in that. But I just love the notion that I'm not finished with you yet. So get in there and serve, and I'll guide you. And that's how my life has been. And it's been rewarding, and it's been, again, like I said, kind of at the beginning, I wouldn't change a thing. And that's something, I guess the part I would change is I'd like to have those that were lost back, but that made me stronger. It gave me more faith, and I had so many opportunities to help strengthen other people because of that.
I like to use this to try to bring like different organizations together, and one of the things I am particularly interested in is helping veterans, who can't speak for themselves, find a voice with the VA. Do you have any advice on that, or anything you've seen along the way that works well?
Yeah, I think it's hard when you're struggling yourself to have a voice, but here's what I know the VA is trying to do today is that the last time I was there, they really wanted to know how they served you, what they could do to serve you better. I think that's the opportunity. And for the veteran that is going there sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, I said, they understand if you speak your mind. They don't always know what you're thinking. So I would say, speak your mind, be gentle and gracious about it, but the VA wants to improve, and they're there to try and serve you. It's a hard thing, because I think a lot of times the veteran, you don't really know what's wrong with you. You just know you're not right. I don't know if that helps at all, but that's I'm big on giving feedback, and I think there's 2 parts to feedback. One's affirmation, and I think we ought to give affirmation. But in my life, I'll just use this. And in a way, 9/11 was a feedback mechanism. I learned a lot about leadership during crisis because of that. And so, you know, when you go back, and you probably both did this, you do after action reviews. When you're done, what could I have done better? That's a way of getting your own feedback. But I also like to collect feedback from the people that work for me.
Sure.
And so the more, that's I think I call that the breakfast of champions.
Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of close. One of the most important things about what we are trying to do here, and having someone like yourself share your experiences, first and foremost, I don't, you know, 9/11 was an important event in our history, and it's one that that we should never allow to be pushed to the wayside. And sometimes there's efforts to do that because life is just moving forward. But as veterans, you know, those experiences have to be honored at all the time. They have to be reminded. And you know, when Joe and I talk about the experiences that we have in dealing with our own issues as veterans, the one thing that always comes back is, you know, how do we not lose those people who aren't able to be as self-advocates like we are, to be strong and just kind of self-centered in that way. You know, and that's kind of where we lose people. So having these opportunities to speak to people like you is a great way for us to, I guess, to give some service back. So, so General Van, we really are honored to have you share your story. We appreciate it. And we'll be sharing this on 9/11 so that hopefully it'll inspire other people to give some homage to the people that you lost, but to all the other people who fought for that. And maybe sometime we can speak again. Joe can tell you about his experiences with the post 9/11 in New York, and how, you know, that whole experience was. I'm sure you'd be up for that, Joe.
Yeah, that's a story that if we don't want to get into, I ended up briefly. I ended up in Fleet Week 2 years after 9/11 in New York City, and it was quite the gracious reception, I will state, by the city of New York. So, I mean, it's appreciated. And going back to what we said, I think that if you're a veteran and you're out there and you're struggling with some stuff, you know, just show up at the VA or talk to another vet and see what you can do to start moving forward, because you may know something isn't right, but you're just not sure what it is. And that's the thing that you might want to work on for you and your family and, you know, everyone out there. So,
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I want to thank both of you for what you're doing. I mean, I'm strongly supporting you guys, and thank you for doing this. We shouldn't forget. I don't know that the memorial outside the Pentagon is open right now because of what's going on with COVID-19, but anyone that ever goes to DC or Northern Virginia, there where the Pentagon is, that is worth going through and just meditating and do there. And anytime I'm in DC, I try and get there and go visit the memorials to my folks and other folks that I knew.
Well, I think on that note, we'll bid you adieu, and we really appreciate your time, General. And again, I hope we can reach out to you again, and maybe we can talk about some other things in your career that people might want to learn about.
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. Thank you both. Thanks for what you do. God bless.
Aloha. God bless.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.